The Senate vote, Arama, ahead of the final vote on COVID relief, began with Senator Bernie Sanders' $15 an hour minimum wage amendment that will apparently fail with bipartisan opposition. I don't know if they've gavelled down Senator Sanders, chairman of the Budget Committee, joins me now. But as of the last I checked, there were 7 Democrats plus Angus King, the independent from Maine, voting against it. I don't know if that's the final vote.
I think that's roughly right, Andrea. Look, here is the bottom line. To my mind, the great crisis economically that we're facing in America is that 63% of the American people today are living paycheck to paycheck. And many, many millions of people are working at jobs that do not enable them to take adequate care of their families. In other words, they're working at starvation wages. The American people want us to raise the minimum wage to a living wage of $15 an hour. And while I'm disappointed at the vote today, let me be very clear. We are not giving up on this. We are going to come back with vote after vote, and one way or the other, we are going to pass a $15 an hour minimum wage. That is what the American people want, and that is what the American people need.
Senator, we've been talking here today about issues like climate change, like immigration reform, like the George Floyd bill, all of these pieces of legislation that are going to get through the House, not that comfortably given the smaller margins, but get through the House and die in the Senate unless something is done because of no matter how popular they are. And that's what's so striking about this. And if you're facing that kind of a roadblock, is it time to rethink the filibuster?
Well, I would say 2 things. Right now, as you've indicated, just today, we're dealing with, I think, the most consequential piece of legislation for working people in the modern history of this country. And we're doing that through a reconciliation process, which means that we only need 50 votes plus the vice president. And as you know, this legislation is going to provide $1,400 for every working class person and their children. It's going to extend unemployment with a $400 supplement on top of normal unemployment, put a whole lot of money into education so that we can reopen our schools, expand healthcare. It is enormously important. Sadly enough, we have 0 Republican support. So your point is well taken. In one way or another, we're going to have to do what the American people want us to do. This COVID bill we're debating today, enormously popular among Democrats, independents, Republicans. And if we cannot get Republican support in one way or another, we've got to go forward. Now, you're asking me about the filibuster. It is my position, absolutely, that democracy has got to prevail in the United States Senate. We continue to have a minority who are obstructing what the American people want. So count me in as somebody who believes that majority should rule in the Senate so that we can begin doing the business of the American people.
Did it hurt your cause when President Biden a few weeks ago seemed to be acknowledging that the minimum wage could not survive? Did that take some wind out of your sails?
Well, that's not what he said. He talked about what he thought the parliamentarian would do. And I don't want to bore your viewers with the arcane rules that we have to live under here in the Senate, where in this case, a parliamentarian who was elected by nobody, who essentially is a Senate staffer, made a determination that 32 million Americans should not get a pay raise. That is outrageous. I have nothing against her personally. She, made her opinion. She should not have that responsibility. So all that I'm saying right now is poll after poll shows the American people understand we've got to raise the minimum wage to a living wage, $15 an hour, and we're going to do that. One way or the other, we are going to accomplish that goal.
And is it okay to phase it in, to go to 10, to go to 12, to
Andrea, that is what the bill is about.
Years?
What do you think is in the bill? That's exactly what it is. It's a 5-year phase-in. So people say, oh, you're going to $15 an hour tomorrow. Just not true. You're going from 7.25 to 9.50 to 11 to 12.50 to 14 to 15. It is a phase-in bill.
What about what Senator Romney and some of the other Republicans have talked about, though? A lower amount.
It's useless. Look, we need, as I said earlier, the great crisis economically we're facing is so many of our people are living paycheck to paycheck. Raising the minimum wage, as I think Romney proposes, to $10 an hour at the end of 5 years is fairly meaningless. Look, what I'm proposing is not radical. It's what the American people want and need. And by the way, some 8 states in this country have already moved toward a $15 an hour minimum wage. Dozens of cities have done it. The House of Representatives has done it. President of the United States supports it. It's time for the Senate to do the same.
And what does it say about the caucus? What does it say, Senator, about the caucus, though, that 7 Democrats, really 8, including Senator King, were against us? How do you work that? How do you persuade them?
Well, I think what we are going to be doing now is rallying the American people and demanding that all Democrats support this and Republicans as well. To my mind, this is an issue that impacts all working people. It especially impacts women who are disproportionately working for low wages. It disproportionately impacts the African American and Latino community, and those folks are also working at low wage jobs. So we're going to get the word out, and we're going to mobilize people from coast to coast. And at the end of the day, here's my prediction: we will pass that. All right?
Thank you so much, Senator. On a busy day, thanks for coming.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. You should know that you can follow today's top stories and breaking news and catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.